We are in a broken economy in Tarkov. Probably the most broken we've ever had. And something new I'm going to have to start doing is differentiating between PvP and PvE. Though both really have broken economies, and they're essentially caused for the same reason, what I'm referring to from this video is PvP. PvE folks, your economy is like Zimbabwe or Yugoslavia or the Weimar Republic. And without some kind of wipe to deal with that, it's not going to change. Which is what brings me to PvP and why it can be fixed, or at least what BSG can do to make some changes so it doesn't break so fast in our next wipe with probably patch 15. Patch 14 has had the worst economy in Tarkov history. To keep the next patch from walking down that same path, BSG needs to deal with a few specific factors that are causing the majority of these problems with the in-game economy. These problems are out of control inflation and arbitrage. Inflation is primarily driven by Bitcoin and arena rewards. It's what makes everything players sold really expensive and leads to tons of issues with risk and reward. Arbitrage, which is the ability to buy stuff from the flea or the traders and then turn around and sell that same stuff on the flea yourself, renders entire core game loops unnecessary. So how does inflation break the economy? Now, if you pay attention to the news, even the slightest bit, you've heard this term thrown around a lot in real life the last couple of years. And the concepts, as well as the cause and effects, are exactly the same in Tarkov as they are in real life. Simply put, inflation makes things more expensive over time. It is caused by the currency of the game being devalued through adding more supply of the money into the system. Now, to explain this, I have to touch into some economic 101 principles, if you will, here. The primary currency of Tarkov is Roubles. Yes, there are dollars and euros, but those are all mostly based off of Roubles. So they're just a different flavor of that. So to keep things simple, we're just going to consider one currency going forward in the video. Roubles are just a number we use to value the time we spend in the game. It's the very base thing we earn with our playtime. We use that to trade our hour of playtime with another player's hour of playtime. So if I find weapons or ammo, I can trade that to players that find meds or barter items that I want to use to craft. That is the medium in which it happens. Now, at the start of each wipe, the total number of rubles is set by what we start with in our stashes. From there, it grows with every raid run by every player. In patch 14, money is created in a few ways. The first is through task rewards. So when you finish a task, you get a reward from the trader. That essentially prints money, it creates it. The same thing happens when you sell anything to the traders. They take that item out of your stash, but they give you currency in return, and that doesn't come from anywhere, it just created out of thin air. Currency is also created when you find money in raid, but is very limited. That's a small amount, doesn't have a huge impact on the game. Now finally, with the linking of arena, we have the money that comes from arena being the final inflationary action, and has honestly been the most impactful we've ever seen. Whenever you compete in arena, you just get rubles created, and you can transfer 1.5 million of those rubles over to Tarkov, again, just printing money. So as the wipe goes on, more and more money is injected into the overall economy. So this is the primary factor that causes prices to increase steadily over a wipe for almost all items. Now, supply and demand, as well as Tarkov's listing system for the flea, do impact prices too. That's like honestly 5 or so videos worth of stuff to discuss and how that all works and how they all are intertwined with one another. So if you want me to get into some of that stuff, break that kind of stuff down, maybe we do another series of videos, but let me know down in the comments or by liking the video. That is feedback for me and lets me know you guys actually enjoy this kind of content. Because while this stuff is super interesting to me, if it's not interesting to you, it's not really worth doing videos on. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I'm assuming if you're here, you like my content. That just lets YouTube know that it should show it to you when it pops up. Now, like almost all games that have player-driven economies, there are also money sinks included into the game loops to try to keep inflation under control, or at least slow it down. These deflationary measures in Tarkov boil down to mechanics we use every day in all the ways we play. Insurance, repairs of armor or weapons, any consumables like meds or ammo or food, the flea market fee, and even some quests act as money sinks. Essentially, anything that deletes rubles from the game is a money sink or is deflationary. And for a long time, these costs did a great job of keeping the ruble volume in control. It didn't halt inflation entirely, but it kept it on a slow, steady pace that didn't blow the way the rest of the game functions apart. And this is extremely important to player motivations, because as people get richer and richer, they care less and less about the gear they have or the money they need to make in raids with their meta parts and the best ammo and stuff like that all being readily available. This pushes Tarkov further and further away from a survival game and more towards a Call of Duty with extra steps, if you will. Now, you might be fine with that. I'm not criticizing that. I'm saying that's a result of it. But regardless of if you are or not, it renders huge swaths of the game meaningless. Tarkov derives a ton of its replayability from its depth. When you get rid of that depth, the game becomes stale fast. This also funnels players into metas and redundant kits. It leaves you with no need to pick up 90% of the loot in the game because you can just buy the best gear from traders. And when bolts and sugar are worth more than even some of the most rare items in the game, like lions, this leads to boredom and lack of interest. Now, the first time we saw things get blown apart was in 2021, with Bitcoin pushing over 800K for the first time. It took a little while, but BSG did try to pull this back by both adjusting the value of Bitcoins, they pretty much put a modifier to it, and then heavily nerfed the Bitcoin farm, reducing how many they generated. Those were the last adjustments we saw. And this is primarily one of the biggest flaws with what they have gone with Bitcoin. It is linked to IRL prices. If Bitcoin goes up or down in IRL, it does it in Tarkov. And the problem with this is most Tarkov's money sinks are fixed. They don't go up with the increase in Bitcoin. Traders' prices don't inflate, insurance doesn't get more expensive, and the flea market fee doesn't grow to counter this. So as Bitcoin goes up, so does the overall money supply. So while it's really cool that Bitcoin and currency exchange rates are tied to IRL prices, it is the epitome of smashing a square peg into a round hole. Having dynamic systems like this interlinked with fixed systems such as trader prices is a recipe for chaos. The simple fix to this is to fix the price of Bitcoin. Set it at 125 or 250 or 300,000 or whatever you want. Then you don't have to worry about it affecting barters that use Bitcoin, or if the price goes up and it inflates the economy, or monkeying around with spawn rates or the Bitcoin farm rate to counter the increase in value. Because if you want to balance a dynamic price, you have to balance everything that price touches. And unfortunately, Bitcoin touches everything in the game. So there are more complex ways to keep this cool factor of Bitcoin being dynamic. But if you do that, it makes all the fixes that much more complex as well. Next up is Arena. And this one is actually probably the more difficult one to fix. The cash that flows into the game from Arena is staggering. Its impact on the game economy could be seen within the first 2 weeks of the wipe, probably even a little bit sooner. How do we know this? By looking at metrics of inflation in the game, which there are a few. But one of the most consistent price arcs every wipe is Pile of Meds. This is because of a few reasons. One, it's a profitable craft that is simple and easy, so lots of people do it, making supply of it stable. Two, Pile of Meds are used in several crafts and barters that are also profitable, making demand stable as well. So it's easy to see how much money is in the game by watching this one item. Each wipe where we had high Bitcoin prices, we saw Pile of Meds climb more and more beyond wipes where Bitcoin stayed low, and we've had those. But this last wipe was unlike anything we've seen. And the only change that can affect this is Arena. So how do we fix Arena's impact? I'm not really sure. The simple fix is just make it so you can't transfer money from Arena to Tarkov. But that's likely a bridge too far. BSG has spent a lot of effort and time linking these two games. Though it has yet to really work well, I still think they won't just throw this mechanic out for the sake of a stable economy. So this means BSG is going to have to walk a razor's edge between rewarding players enough to encourage them to play Arena, but limiting the money flow enough to not blow the economy apart. Now, I'll straight admit, this might not even be possible. There might not be a happy medium where you can reward players enough to make them encouraged to play it and not break the economy. Now, you could really limit the impact by moving the entire Arena economy over to just GP coins, and then having that the only thing you can transfer, and then therefore it's the only thing you can get off a ref. But that doesn't necessarily fix the problem either, because there's still an inflationary component with that. It's just not as drastic and fast acting. But for the next wipe, what I hope BSG really does is strangle down on how much money you can transfer to Tarkov. Like as far down as 250K per day. I know that's going to make a lot of you people freak out. I get it. Some of you guys love the fact that you can transfer money. It allows you to play Tarkov. I get it. I understand that. But it's the cost versus the reward, or the cost versus the benefit side of this. And all I think is we have to start off there, just so that we can see where it goes. If the economy is stable at that level, then they can gradually turn it up as the wipe progresses. You could even set it to where you can send 1.5 million per day, but you can only send, let's say, 3 million per week or per 7 days or something along those lines, to allow people that only play once or twice a week to send their money, but people that play every day can't absolutely crush the economy. So there's lots of ways you could come out of this. But the problem is if you go with too much out of the gate, it's harder to turn it down without players freaking out even more, and you can't pull that money back out of the economy once it's there. Now, moving on from inflation, we're going to talk about arbitrage. This involves the biggest change that has pretty much ripped the game economy to shreds, and that was removing the found and raid requirement for the flea market without any other adjustments. This change happened in the middle of last wipe, but we got to see the full effects of it this wipe when it started at the beginning of the wipe and went on. Now, the biggest issue with this isn't necessarily that you can sell stuff non-found and raid on the flea market. It's the fact that you can buy things off the flea market or from traders, then turn around and sell them back on the flea market. This is called arbitrage. In general, arbitrage causes consumable items to get more expensive than they have in the past, while decreasing the price of non-consumable items from what they were in the past. And to be clear, this does not cause inflation. Every step of this actually deletes money from the game, so technically it's a money sink. If a player buys something from a trader to resell it, those rubles are deleted. And whenever the player interacts with one another, you sell from one to another, the total money supply decreases as well, because the flea market fee is also deleting rubles. And you're not creating money, you're just moving money from one player to another. This doesn't make it a good thing though. Consumables become more expensive because they have a high turnover. This provides volatility, which is what is necessary for someone to flip things on the flea. When pile of meds swing from between a high of about 40k and a low of 25k or sometimes even less, players can buy hundreds of piles of meds, hundreds of items, at the lower price and then resell them at a higher price. This in aggregate pushes up the average price of pile of meds compared to other wipes. And this isn't being done just by players. Keep in mind, there are lots of bots on the flea market, and all they do is auto buy below a certain price so that the individual using them can log in and later sell at a much higher price. And the only way this is possible at scale is with arbitrage. I'm not going to get into a bunch of detail, but it also leads into some other bad mechanics, things like cheating. RMT is a primary funder of cheating. A lot of shady outfits use RMT to fund their operations, and this just makes it that much easier. But moving past that, on the converse end of this, they also make things like weapon attachments and other non-consumable gear cheaper. And sure, this might sound like a good thing at first, but here is my issue with it. Things like rare weapon attachments used to be some of the most valuable loot you could find in raid. Many of the items would sell for as much as 50 or 60k per slot, or way more sometimes. And this was in an economy where anything over 15k a slot was worth far more on the far end of the bell curve of good loot. Now, in the wipe we're in, things like the SE5 grip, which is one of the meta grips, sells for like 20 to 30k instead of the 80 or 100 or even more that it used to sell for. And while on one hand this is cool because it makes things cheaper, you can build your guns cheaper, you can get all your gear cheaper. On the other hand, it makes hundreds of items in the raid less valuable and less exciting to find. It also means that more people have them, more people are running meta kits. You get out of that, that need and that risk and reward. Right now, nobody's going to run an RK1 or something a little bit cheaper if they can just buy an SC5 when, the stats are all that much better and it costs 5,000 more rubles. This also means that it's less important to complete tasks to unlock gear, since it's really not all that much more expensive to buy them on the flea than it is from the trader. Here we are again with another mechanic that is removing huge swaths of the game's content. Now, straight up, I'm not saying BSG needs to go back on the found and raid requirements for the flea. I think the ability to sell players gear that you picked up in raid because you killed them is a great change, but they do need to find a way to prevent items bought from the traders or bought from the flea from being flipped instantly on the flea market. I do think these changes alone will restabilize Tarkov's economy, making the gameplay loops more fulfilling and lengthening the duration of playtime of all players regardless of background. Now, there are a ton of intertwined topics and concepts that I only scratched the surface of in this video, so keep that in mind. Player-driven economies for video games are some of the most difficult things to get right, and they are even more difficult to maintain. Gamers break shit. It's just what we do in our endless hunt for competitive edges or other cool outliers. But hopefully this video helped you understand some of these mechanics and what I see as issues in the Tarkov economy, so you can better understand what's going on around you in the game. We'll wrap it up here with a quick shout out to my music, links down in the description. It's mostly lo-fi stuff, it's free to listen to, and supports me as a content creator without you spending a dime. A lot of people enjoy it. Go check it out. We've been growing pretty good. Make sure that if you're on Spotify, you follow my artist page there and add some songs to your playlist if you can. That all works. That's how the algorithm works over there. We've also made the music with content creators in the community in mind, as in it's free for you to use in your YouTube videos or your streams if you like, without the fear of DMCA takedowns or copyright strikes. We didn't make it for any of that. All that we ask is that you attribute us, so if people like the music they're listening to in your background, they know where to find it. And that's it. Free to use. But with that, we'll finish it up. Thank you guys for watching as always. Quick reminder, don't forget that like button and all the other thingies down below, subscribe, all that stuff, notifications. All those important ones, they help me out a ton. They don't cost you guys anything. But after that, all I got is good luck in your raids, and we'll see you in Tarkov.